Stay tuned for the Joan Quinn Profiles. Joan served the state of California as a member on the Arts Council and on the Film Commission. She was formerly on the Architectural Commission and fulfilled 2 terms on the Fine Arts Commission for the city of Beverly Hills. As an editor for Andy Warhol's Interview magazine, Condé Nast Publications, and the Hearst Corporation, Joan covered the world of fashion, the mysteries of food, the excitement of theater, and the international art scene. She continues to find people who are on the cutting edge of their professions. Here's Joan AGAJAINIan Quinn.
Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome to the Joan Quinn Profiles. We're here taping at the Hollywood Museum in the heart of Hollywood, and we're in the old Max Factor building, which is an historic site. Our guests are composer Bruce Broughton and artist Mona Kuhn. LA-based musician Bruce Broughton is a multiple Emmy Award-winning composer with nominations for a Grammy and an Oscar. He's scored films like Silverado, Lost in Space, The Presidio, and a number of TV shows from Hawaii Five-0 to Dallas. And he teaches at the Thornton School of Music at USC, where he graduated with a Bachelor of Arts, but said that the Thornton School wasn't there then. Wasn't there when I was there either.
I was there. No, the building wasn't there either.
And he also teaches at the Herb Alpert School of Music at UCLA. Bruce has written a cello concerto, which will debut with a performance by Andrew Schulman and presented by the Jacaranda Group. So Bruce, how does a cello concerto take place when you play the piano, and how do you actually compose for cello?
Very slowly.
Do you have to play the cello to compose for it?
I'm not a cellist, and I know the very basic technique. I know how many strings it has, and I know that it's bowed with the right hand and played with the left. But I know, in this particular case, I know Andrew Schulman, and Andrew's a tremendous artist. I had written a cello sonata for him a couple of years ago, and Patrick Scott, who runs Jacaranda, heard it and liked it, and said, "Boy, you should write a cello concerto." And so that's basically how it happened.
What's the difference between a sonata and a concerto?
Well, usually a sonata is smaller forces. It could be a solo instrument. In this particular case, it's cello and piano. The concerto is usually a little bit more virtuosic. It has a little bit of razzle-dazzle in it.
Does it have more people playing with him?
Yeah, and this one actually is a chamber concerto. This has 10 people playing.
That was what was interesting. So do you write for the other 10 people too?
Yep.
Oh, you do?
Yep.
So what instruments are the other 10?
Well, it's just one of almost everything. I have a flute, an oboe, clarinet, bassoon, trumpet, horn, trombone, piano, bass, percussion.
So you write the parts for all of those.
Yeah.
Do you conduct it then? Do they need
No,
a
I'm not
conductor?
Ben Wolfish is going to conduct. He's a young composer, very good conductor who's going to do it. I was going to do it, but I'm just too busy at the moment to get into the rehearsals and things, so Ben's going to do it. It's probably better to have somebody else do it.
You do conduct, though.
Yeah,
do you conduct your own compositions?
Yeah, usually.
Usually?
Yeah, usually.
And you've written for horn, strings, piccolo, tuba, and obviously, I should say obviously, because you said you play the piano. You don't play those instruments, right?
No, I used to play French horn badly.
So you knew that
I know the
machinations
fingerings,
of
yeah.
that, right?
But I'm not a woodwind player. I'm not a string player. My wife is a violinist.
So does she help? She can
Well,
help?
yeah, no, sometimes she does. Sometimes she does. I say, is this playable? And she said yes or no, or do you want to hear it? And sometimes I say, can you look at this? In fact, yesterday I was asking her a question about a score. And no, I often ask her. And so I know a composer is supposed to know the basic techniques of the instruments and then supposed to know how to combine them.
But is there a difference in writing a concerto or a solo piece for a piccolo compared to like the cello?
Oh, yeah. For one thing, a piccolo is very high and very bright.
I was just going to say,
but not always. And if a piccolo actually...
It's so tiny.
That's actually what piccolo means. It just means small, right?
Piccolo,
so
right.
it's literally a small flute.
Right.
So it's only about this big. So when it plays when it plays very low, it gets very soft, and it's very easy to cover. When you play it very high, it's hard not to hear it because it's so high. So the trick in that is to put it with an orchestra in a way that it will always be heard in the way that you want it to be. The piccolo concerto
high
that I
or
wrote,
low?
high or low. If it's playing a melody or doing something very tricky, you want to be sure as the soloist that you never cover it up. Same with the cello.
So that's how these pieces are written,
Right.
that you write. So you know that they're going to, well, you're writing it for them. You're writing it for
Right.
that instrument. So
Right.
it should be.
Well, you hope
Right?
you hope you did it right. A lot of it's guesswork, but
In that respect too. When you're teaching at the Albert School or the Thornton School, do you teach how to write like this for an instrument?
yeah, that's under the category of orchestration.
Oh, I see.
So you teach the instruments, you teach the ranges, you try to get them to hear the sound, you talk about the combinations, you talk about what produces this certain effect, what produces that certain effect. I have a lot of movie and TV experience, and that's a very specialized thing because you're always using the instruments to create a very specific effect. For instance, I had a director one time who we were working on a comedy, and he said, "I'm not laughing. It's not funny."
I was just going to ask you, can you write to make those emotions come out?
Yeah, you have to. You have to. You have to say, this is scary, this is exciting, this is romantic, this is better than you think it is. This movie's actually a lot more exciting than you think it is.
Yeah, I was going to say, how do you make the instruments talk to the audience? Is that part of it?
Well, that's part of what you learn. That's part of what you learn. And the interesting thing is that everybody has a slightly different perception, a slightly different sensitivity on what the instruments feel like emotionally. So when you're working
interpreting?
Yeah, I mean, for some people, for instance, a xylophone is a very funny instrument. For other people, it would just be an annoying, loud
ting, ting,
thing.
ting.
Yeah,
I see.
So you have to work all those things in a way that you can get the biggest effect for the greatest number of people.
But when you talk about teaching and you're teaching your students like about an instrument, do you bring someone in to play those instruments to teach them the sounds and they see it?
Yeah, because the instruments sound very different depending on where they are. For instance, the cello has 4 strings. It goes from low to high. But the cello plays very, 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 very high. It doesn't sound the same when it's playing very high as it does when it's playing very low. It almost sounds like a different instrument.
Oh, a different instrument.
So you want to know what the cello sounds like way up there and way down there.
So you have these demonstrations. Well,
Yeah.
like with the tuba too?
Absolutely.
Do people use the tuba a lot?
Yeah, I mean, you wouldn't know it, but, well, I mean...
Well, I know, because it's like a big, bulky instrument.
Well, that's what you'd think, and it is. It plays very low, and people think of it as being this big...
Yes.
But actually, it has about as much versatility as a trumpet. I mean, you can move around, you can play lots of things on a tuba, but people just don't think about that. So those are the things you have to learn.
And you teach another thing, scoring, because you've scored all these films that are just fantastic. And when I was listening to the music for some of these films, they move you. They take you along. They do things to you. Yeah. Of course, I didn't see the film in front of me. I was just listening to the music.
Well, it's an interesting thing. If you saw some of these films without the music, it would be a very different experience.
Yeah, how do you do that? When you score a film, what do you do?
What do you do? You look at the picture, you hope that the picture is finished.
You mean the whole film is finished?
Yeah, the whole thing. You hope that it's finished, and then you look at the picture, and the thing that I think people don't realize is with a movie, you can show it 10 times, and it'll always be the same length. Every scene will be exactly the same length because it's all tied into a visual image. So your music has to be exactly the same length. We know exactly how long every one of our notes are. If somebody reacts and you get there too soon, well, you're too soon. If you get there too late,
it doesn't show, right?
Yeah, so you time everything. You time all that, which is the biggest difference one of the big differences between movie music and my cello concerto. The cello concerto, he can play it faster or slower, depending on how he feels it, and it's okay. But in a movie, you have to play it one way, and you have to write it that way, and you have to know the effect that you're going to get in order to satisfy the demands.
So you're watching the movie. Are you sitting in a booth? Are you sitting in? Where are you sitting?
Look,
physically.
My first credit on television was on Gunsmoke.
Gunsmoke.
That shows you how long I've been doing it, right?
Yeah.
I've been doing this for a long time.
Before the Thornton School.
A long time, yeah, before the Thornton School. So this was in the last years of Gunsmoke. In those days, when we would look at a TV show, we would go into a little room, a little projection room, and we'd actually run the movie. Now it's all on digital.
Oh,
so
you
what they
just
do
use
is
your
they send
computer.
you a file. So you put it up on your computer, and you sit there, and you go back and forth, and you change it, and all this stuff. Somebody told me the other day that on a movie, I think it was over at Disney, that they were shooting the picture. As soon as they finished shooting the scene, that file went to an editor who then included it in all the other shots from that scene. So he put together the scene so the director could see how it was working. And when the director approved it, then that whole file went to another editor who was putting the whole movie together. So the process, it's all very different.
And how
very
was
different.
that for you, from coming from the last
Well, it's-
Gunsmoke to now on a computer, everything?
You have to learn a lot. You have to keep up. I mean, it's one thing to use a cello. It's another thing to use a computer.
What about, do you compose on the computer?
Yeah, sometimes, yeah.
You do that?
Well, I'm working on a TV show right now. I'm doing it on the computer. I've never really done a whole show like that, but I have this score in front of me. It's all a virtual score. And instead of, well, I actually play on a keyboard. It's not a piano, but it's a piano keyboard. And I enter the notes, but I have to space the notes, and I have to enter the notes by hand, and I have to line the things up, because when they make changes, they make digital changes. So I have to make digital changes as well.
Right.
So it's, yeah, you have to keep up.
What about when you see the scenes, does that inspire you? You haven't written anything yet,
Yeah.
right? You have
It
to see the
inspires you.
scene, and then
Yeah.
you have to get...
You have to know what you look at the scene or you look at the movie and you say, oh, this movie has essentially what I'm writing about. I'm going to write about romance, or I'm going to write about drama, or it's a scary picture, I'm going to write that. So then you try to hold the feeling, and then you try to find the music that expresses that feeling.
So they're all different kinds of series, like on the History Channel, and then for HBO you did like President Roosevelt and the polio thing. I mean, those are all so diverse in the music.
Well, I could probably get 5 pieces that I'd written, and it would be hard to know that it was the same guy who wrote it.
That's
well,
interesting.
I mean, Silverado's a Western. Tiny Toon Adventures is an old-fashioned comedy, cartoon.
Right.
Jag is a military show. I did the theme for that.
Oh, you have these themes that have lived on and
I've got
on
a
and
bunch of
on,
stuff.
right?
Lost in Space is a,
Yeah.
space show. I mean, they're all very, very, very different. They're Miracle on 34th Street, or whatever, 34th Street. Yeah. It's a Christmas show, so there's a Santa Claus element in it. I mean, all of this music is very, very different. And
So
it's
how
like an
do you
actor.
get your head into it?
Well, it's like an actor. You do it like an actor. You take on a role. You say, oh, I'm going to be doing a Christmas movie. And you start to take on the movie, and pretty soon you're in sort of a Christmassy spirit, and you write that.
Well, when I was listening to the music that you'd written, then comes this nomination for an Oscar that's a hymn. It's like didactic, it's holy, it's spiritual, and it's so different from everything else.
That was for a period film. It was a film that took place in the middle of the 17th century. So the trick then, because it actually took place in the movie, the song was used in the movie, the trick was to come up with a tune that could have existed in the middle of the 18th century.
So it would have been a
So
song
I
like
modeled it on tunes of that time. Like right now, I'm working on a thing for the History Channel with my friend John Debney. We're doing a thing called Texas Rising. It's about Texas independence, the war with Mexico.
Were you just in Nashville doing that?
Yeah.
Why did you go to Nashville? Why didn't you do it here or in
Budget.
Texas?
Strictly budget.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
It's easier, better there?
No, it's not easier and better there. It's actually easier and better here, but it's budget.
But
And,
it's cheaper and better.
Yeah, it wasn't, I mean, it worked out okay, but
I
it was
see.
not my choice.
I see.
And I would much prefer to do it here.
But so you had to do, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I knew that you were doing, so that's a Western.
So it's a Western, but you have little funny things that come up. We were talking about the source music. Well, the source music is the music that an actor can hear in the scene, meaning a piano player or a guitarist.
Yeah.
Like that. And so I said to the producer, well, we could probably just use some Stephen Foster here. And he says, no, that's too soon. He says, Stephen Foster wasn't around yet. This is 1836.
Oh,
So I
this is
looked it
for
up, and
him.
he was right. Stephen Foster was about 15 years later. So the music in 1836 is not quite the same as the music in
Right.
1846. And you have to be aware of that stuff when you're writing.
But
the
you have
music.
this churchy thing then. You
So the
knew that
churchy
was
thing-
going on, right?
Yeah,
And
and so
10 years earlier.
that hymn is sort of like, the style of it is sort of like Amazing Grace.
Exactly.
Which is right around the same time.
Yeah,
so it's a
that's
very
what-
simple tune, and it fit just fine.
And let's give Patrick Scott a bravo for having your cello concerto.
Yes, let's do. It's a great venue.
It's great.
I'm very happy to have it.
Good, and we're glad that you were with us. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you.
And don't go away because we have photographer, artist Mona Kuhn as our next guest. Hi, I'm Joan Quinn, and welcome back to the Joan Quinn Profiles. Here we are at the Hollywood Museum on Highland Avenue, and I'm with artist, photographer Mona Kuhn, who was born and raised in São Paulo, Brazil, by her German parents. Her work is in collections around the world, and she's been in exhibits internationally and in important museums and galleries like the Royal Academy, which I absolutely love, and the Getty, and the Leopold where's the Leopold Museum?
Vienna.
In Vienna.
Yeah.
So you have had this big international
Yes, we've been causing trouble.
presence, big
Yes.
presence, also Belgium, Germany, Switzerland, and the International Center of
Photography in New York.
Studies
Yes.
in New York, which is like the epitome, right? Fantastic
Well,
to be in that.
Yes, yes.
Can I call you an artist?
A worker, maybe?
No,
I don't
mean,
really.
is it
I
like
don't
a
really-
photographer?
Yeah, photographer, artist, a creative person.
Do you like to just be called a photographer?
I love photography. I always love photography because I like how fast the medium is. I like how quick
you
it
like
is.
that, yeah.
I like
That's your
it.
personality,
Yes.
isn't it?
That's a little bit my personality.
Yeah.
But then the trick is, because it's so fast and because nowadays everyone can do it, how do you do differently?
But did you
That's the
paint at
heart.
all?
I did a little bit of charcoal, and I'm very
Drawing.
involved drawing, lots of drawing, and I'm really involved in art history. I do a lot of research. I'm a scholar,
Oh, you
independent
are?
scholar at the Getty.
Well, what I
research.
wanted to know is, to get started,
Yeah.
did you pick up a camera first, or did you pick up a charcoal? or
Charcoal.
dry- Oh, you did?
Yes,
before
because
the camera.
because I was doing human form. I was always doing the human form.
And that's always in charcoal, isn't it?
And that's always, it's always starts in charcoal. I think it's like but there was a couple of things that I found really interesting at the time that I tried to translate later on to photography, the simplicity of charcoal. And also the idea of charcoal being the burnt,
Yes, the ashes.
the
like.
ashes and the body and everything came together.
Well, that's really interesting.
Yes.
That's a great. I never
Yes.
think about it
and
like
very
that. but-
minimal, very, in a way, very non-pretentious. It's not oil.
You
It's
know,
just charcoal.
When I sat for David Hockney, I'm dropping names
Yes.
now, but
I
when I,
know,
sat
I
for
know
the
your
painting,
it's gorgeous.
he took the canvas and he did it in charcoal. He's been
So
using a
beautiful,
lot
yeah.
of charcoal now
Yeah.
because he's been getting different colors out of it.
Right. Shadings, and it's
Yes,
gorgeous.
yes.
But I have to
And
say, soft, yes. But I have to say that once I pick up the camera, I drop the charcoal.
Yeah, well, that's
In a way,
that's
yeah.
where we are now.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
We're to that point. But it's interesting how you got there and how the two combined, because most of your work, a lot of your work, and we're going to talk about it, is like in the desert,
Yes.
which has that burned feeling.
Exactly. The scent, the dust.
Dust.
That idea of T.S. Eliot going back to dust in a way.
So let's go back to your schooling. Where did you get
Yes.
schooled?
So first I went to Ohio State University. I was coming from Brazil. My father was working in Ohio, so I
Oh, but wait,
went there.
was there a big German community in Brazil?
In Brazil, there was a big community, yes, a huge German colony, but not just German. My parents were very good friends with Lebanese, Japanese.
different communities, I
Different
see.
communities. Huge Italian community, a lot, of course, a lot of German Jews.
But that's
that
why
came
I
to
said,
Brazil.
like, the community that you were in when you said, I'm Brazilian.
Right.
You're Brazilian because you
Yes.
were born there, right?
Yes, yes, I feel Brazilian.
But you have German parents.
Right. Well, it's always intriguing. So sometimes I like to say that I push my German traits during the week, and then I'm 100% Brazilian on the weekend.
Oh, at night, dancing.
Or at
dancing
night.
the night away.
Yes. Although I wish I would dancing more often.
Okay, so here we have, so you went to Ohio State?
So I went to Ohio State. So I came to the U.S., went to Ohio State.
Did you learn art, photography? What did you learn?
I learned photography, art history. I was taking a lot of art history classes. And it was about the time where they opened the Wexner Museum.
Oh, that was great. Or it is great.
Wexner Center for the Arts.
Right.
They had the Mershon Auditorium. There was a lot of activity happening. It was exciting.
But was it...
More than someone can imagine.
It was so much,
Yeah.
so rich.
It was
in
rich.
its culture, not just art.
Not just
the
art.
museum, not just, I say. So what would you say your big break was then? During school, after school? Because you've done so much commercial photography.
Right, I did
editorial.
Yes. I would say then I moved, once I finished my school, I went to San Francisco. I took some classes at the Art Institute.
So we're back to art again because
back to art.
they teach art.
Yes, but I was never very academic. I maybe also because I was working with the human form, it was always a little bit sensitive or not always accepted. It would always make people a little bit uncomfortable, even though the images are very mild. It's
Yes,
not
and they're
erotic.
discreet. They're discreet.
They're very discreet.
Yes.
But it makes people want to talk or ask or know what's going on. And
I'm going to show one of those right now.
yes.
Like this is discreet.
Yes. So that series is one of the more recent one where I was in a just outside of Joshua Tree Park. There's an area there where I was going for a hike one day, just behind Noah Purifoy.
I know Noah.
Just right there.
I sat on the Arts Council with Noah Purifoy.
Amazing
What
place.
a great guy.
Yes, amazing.
What a wonderful person.
It's so nice that you caught him
I
alive.
know.
I wish.
I know. Oh, so you never got to meet him?
I never
You
got
just
to
saw
meet
where he
him.
was.
Just the
And
place
is this
itself.
The same?
Yes, and I found this place called Ácido Dourado by this architect Robert Stone, and it's a glass house in the middle of the desert. And I was really fascinated by, again, in a way, the simplicity of the charcoal, but now translated into elements, variations of sand. So it was sand, glass, and mirrors.
And that's what I wanted to ask
Yeah.
you, because that's a series that you're doing for Lapis? Are you doing it
And
for
then
Lapis?
from Lapis, we did a segment of it.
And is this the glass house?
That's the glass house.
So you can see that you shoot through the glass, you
Yes.
shoot inside and out,
Yes,
the reflections.
and there were many planes of glass, almost like a, how you call those places where it's like a mirror, you can, like a
reflections
maze,
and a maze.
like
right,
a maze.
Right.
But because the reflections, the wonderful thing is that the sunlight would enter uninterruptedly and reflect all over.
And then you said the sun came in
And the desert light and the sun, because of the very tall, custom-made, very tall glass planes, the sun would just enter uninterruptedly, just beautiful.
And then what happens to your camera when the sun just blasts it out?
Right. This is
Like
one of the
this.
first times that
Yeah.
I shot everything digitally, because that was the only way that I could understand if the exposure was right or not. It was very tricky. It was tricky.
Because they're beautiful. They're like pieces of
Yeah.
art. But when you look at them, you wonder, is she on the inside? Is she on the outside?
Right.
Where's the reflection? Why is it not clear?
Yes.
I mean, all of those things. But
And I
it's a
think-
piece of art.
Thank you. I think that was a little bit the idea of not knowing if you're inside or outside. It was blending nature, human form, and a little bit of geometry.
And are you in it? Because this is part of the maze.
Right.
Is this you in the middle?
No, this is the person I photographed at the very first moment we arrived.
Oh, so you had all this reflection and all this going on, and the
It was
person was
amazing.
standing. But it looks like the person is taking photographs.
Yes, she was, like everyone now photographs. So when we just arrived,
like when everyone photographs.
right, she placed her suitcase or her little weekend bag down, and then she took her own picture of the place. And because of the optics suddenly the image, I could play a little bit and include some reflection
I
on
see.
choosing the
I
optics.
see. So then how did you get to this art form when you came out of commercial? You did so many commercials, didn't you?
Some commercials, at times I keep
But for
thinking,
what kind of people?
I would say one of my nicest commercial jobs was with Bottega Veneta.
Yeah,
That
I
was
think those
very
are beautiful.
Yes, but in a way it was great because I was working with Tom Meyer, the creative director,
Yes.
who has worked with many, many artists. It was
Oh,
an
he
honor.
has a feeling to.
He has
for
a
art.
feeling. He understands how to bring an artist into the commercial realm and let that person do what they do.
How
That's
much
it.
can you manipulate these art pieces? Do you manipulate the camera, the
I'm-
color?
I manipulate some of the color. I tame it a little bit
Oh, you do?
to my taste, to a palette that I
Oh, you do?
enjoy.
Yeah.
But the capturing, I still believe in capturing as close as I want to my vision.
Uh-huh.
And then I do some minor adjustments later on.
When you go to, say, Joshua Tree or to a desert close by, or one of the deserts, do you have something in mind that you're going to do, or does whatever comes there
Yeah.
come to you?
I wish I was more conceptual,
Oh.
but I am.
Oh, you're planned?
No, I wish I would be, but I'm actually a lot more intuitive.
Oh, I see. So you have to be there to decide what you're going to do.
So I give myself a parenthesis. I give myself, sometimes it might just be color. Like in this case was the sand coloration and the golden tonalities and the
Right.
glass
Fabulous.
translucency.
Really?
So give myself this parenthesis so I don't wander around too much.
Right.
And then within that, I try to create some kind of a visual narrative.
And I think we're going to see that visual narrative at the Lapis Press, and Adam
Yes.
Gross, who found you and thought you were
So
so
great.
great. I know,
And
we love
so
Adam.
supportive.
We love him.
So
and
supportive.
He knows really good artists.
Yes.
And Mona, I'm so happy I got to meet you. If we hadn't seen Paul Rouchet that night, we
Yes.
never would have gotten together.
That's
so I'm
true.
glad.
And Paul-
Thank you, Paul.
That's true. And Paul took me on early on when I moved to Los Angeles.
Oh, he did.
We published, his book was published by the same
Yes, you do
publisher,
Steidl.
Steidl.
Yeah, so that's great.
It was
and I'm so
nice.
happy. And thank you for bringing this book
Yes.
private.
Yes,
backwards.
which just came out.
It's beautiful. And come back again.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
And bye to you. Keep writing to JAQUINN1 at AOL.com.